this like wellspring of creativity and compassion inside you, just kind of waiting to be tapped.
Yeah.
That's what we're diving into today.
Absolutely.
Exploring how wisdom, meditation, compassion,
Right.
and yes, even poetry can help you unlock that deeper experience of life.
And we're not talking about like writing the next great sonnet or anything.
Yeah.
We're going way deeper than that.
Exactly.
We're exploring these ideas as pathways to a more fulfilling way of being.
I love that. A more fulfilling way of being.
Yeah.
And our guide on this journey is a renowned Buddhist master from over 1,000 years ago, Atisha.
Yeah.
Now, before you think,
Right.
what can a monk from the 10th century teach me about living a more vibrant life today? We're diving into Osho's The Book of Wisdom to uncover Atisha's teachings and see how they resonate in our modern world.
Yeah, it's amazing how these ancient teachings can feel so relevant, even now.
Totally.
Like one of the first things that really struck me was Atisha's perspective on meditation.
Okay.
You really believe that it was crucial for developing compassion, but not the end-all be-all. You know?
Right. It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Yes, exactly.
If you're not just taking care of your own inner world, how can you truly show up for others?
Right, exactly. And Atisha uses this really powerful analogy of a bridge.
Okay.
He describes meditation as a bridge to our inner infinity, this boundless source of energy within us.
Yeah.
And it's from that connection, that wellspring, that compassion naturally arises.
Yeah. Just like a lit lamp radiating light outward.
Exactly.
I love how Osho highlights this in the book. He quotes Atisha directly. He says, meditation, if it is true, is bound to overflow into compassion.
It's this idea that compassion isn't something that we have to force.
Right.
But it's a natural overflow of connecting with our true nature.
Okay, so we're connecting with this inner source of energy through meditation.
Right.
But where does poetry come into play in all of this?
Well, and Osho was very adamant that in this context, we're not talking about just like the act of writing poems.
Oh.
He saw poetry as a way of being, a state of surrender, where the divine can express itself through you.
So, I mean, when we usually think of poets, we think of like the Shakespeares of the world. But Osho makes this really interesting distinction between what he calls dreamer poets and Buddha poets.
It's a fascinating concept.
Yes.
He argued that even the greats, even Shakespeare, was really only getting these glimpses of this true poetic state.
Okay.
Like flashes of lightning in the night sky.
Interesting.
They were dreaming it, but they weren't fully embodying it.
So even Shakespeare needed to up his poetry game.
Right. Because the Buddha poets, as Osho called them, lived in this constant state of surrender.
Okay.
And this is what allowed the poetry of existence to flow through them effortlessly.
Wow.
Imagine tapping into that.
That's a pretty powerful image.
Yeah.
But surrender can be a tricky concept.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, at first glance, it sounds passive, like giving up. And we're constantly told to strive, to achieve, to hustle harder.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a paradox for sure.
Yes.
But Osho, he believed that true power actually lies in surrender.
Okay.
In letting go of the need to control everything.
Okay.
And he uses this really beautiful metaphor of the dewdrop merging with the ocean to illustrate this point.
So the dewdrop surrenders its individual form, ceases to exist as a separate entity, and yet it's reborn into this vastness of the ocean.
Exactly.
It's no longer a tiny drop, but it's part of something much larger.
Exactly. And that's the key takeaway here. Surrender isn't about annihilation. It's about merging with something so much greater than ourselves.
Which makes me think about all the anxieties we face, especially in our modern world. So much of it comes from this feeling of being separate, disconnected, alone.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, we build these walls up, these identities, these defenses, all in the name of self-preservation.
Right.
But by doing so, we isolate ourselves from the source of our strength, our creativity, our compassion.
And this is where Atisha's guidance becomes so crucial even 1,000 years later, right?
Absolutely.
He wasn't about laying down the law with rigid rules.
No.
Instead, he offered compassionate hints, guideposts on the path.
He even acknowledged that they were just that hints, not commandments.
Not commandments.
And he compared navigating the spiritual path to climbing Mount Everest.
Okay.
Emphasizing that there are multiple paths to the summit.
I see.
Each with its own unique challenges and breathtaking views.
So it's like he's saying, hey, I've climbed this mountain before.
Right.
Here's what worked for me.
Right.
but feel free to forge your own trail.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
So how do we take these ancient teachings
Right.
and apply them to our lives today?
Right. How do we actually, take action on this?
It's so easy to get caught up in finding that right path, you know?
Oh, yeah.
The one perfect method or system.
Absolutely.
But I think Atisha would probably say there is no one-size-fits-all approach.
Absolutely. And that's something that Osho emphasized constantly.
Right.
The danger of clinging too tightly to any one system of thought,
Right.
any rigid dogma.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted us to be active participants in our own growth,
Right.
not just passive followers.
Right, to really taste the broth as we cook, not just blindly follow a recipe we found online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why Atisha's teachings resonate so strongly even today.
Mm.
He offered guidance,
Right.
a compass for our journey.
Yeah.
But he never claimed to have all the answers.
Right.
He understood that the path is unique for everyone.
Especially given the difference between his world and ours.
Right.
It's not like we can all just run off to a monastery and meditate for hours on end these days.
Right. But that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
Right.
We're not looking for a quick fix,
Right.
a one-size-fits-all solution.
Mm-hmm.
We're exploring these timeless principles
Right.
and seeing how they can empower us
Yes.
in our modern context.
In our modern context, exactly.
Yeah.
So, how do we avoid falling into that trap of dogmatism,
Right.
of clinging too tightly to any one interpretation?
Well, Osho really stressed the importance of keeping an open mind,
Okay.
a willingness to adapt these principles to our own experiences.
Okay.
He even used the word rebel to describe the kind of seeker he encouraged.
Okay. Interesting.
Someone who questions,
Okay.
who challenges,
Mm.
who refuses to be confined by limiting beliefs.
He had such a way with words.
He did.
And he wasn't just talking about rebelling against some external authority, right?
Exactly.
He was also talking about questioning our own internal assumptions,
Yes.
the limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves.
Absolutely. He believed that true freedom came from breaking free from those internal prisons, those self-imposed limitations.
Yeah.
And it's not a one-time thing either.
Right.
It's an ongoing process of questioning, of self-discovery,
Right.
of shedding those layers
Yeah.
that no longer serve us.
Which, let's be honest, can feel a bit daunting at times.
It can be, for sure.
Right.
But it's also incredibly liberating.
Okay.
It frees us from this pressure of having to conform to some predefined mold,
Right.
some external expectation.
Yeah.
And in that space of freedom,
Yeah.
that's where we discover our own unique expression, our own inner poetry.
I love how Osho describes it. He talks about how when we surrender to that deeper creative energy, the whole starts to speak through us.
Yes.
It's like becoming an instrument for something far greater than ourselves.
And he truly believed that applied to all forms of creativity. He encouraged his followers to become poets, musicians, painters, sculptors, to find whatever form of creative expression helped them tap into that inner source.
Didn't he once say that if he met Shakespeare, he would tell him to be more of a poet?
He did.
I love that.
Which always makes me laugh because it highlights this idea that there's always another level, a deeper state of being, a more profound expression waiting to be unlocked.
Right.
Even the greats, even the Shakespeares of the world, were really only catching these glimpses of this true poetic state.
Whereas the Buddha poets, as he called them, live in that constant state of surrender.
Exactly.
Allowing the poetry of existence to just flow through them effortlessly.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's not about forcing it.
Right.
But it's about creating the conditions for that creative energy to flow naturally.
Right.
And that starts with cultivating this state of surrender.
Which, again, easier said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's not like you can just flip a switch and suddenly be in a state of total surrender.
Exactly. It's a practice. It's a process that unfolds over time.
Right.
And it requires us to confront those aspects of ourselves.
Yeah.
That resist letting go, that cling to control, that fear the unknown.
Which makes me think back to Osho's metaphor of the dewdrop merging with the ocean.
Right.
It's such a beautiful image of surrender.
It is.
Of letting go of our individual identity to become part of something much vaster.
And it speaks to something that Atisha emphasized as well.
Okay.
The interconnectedness of all things. We're not these isolated beings.
Right.
We're part of this vast web of life.
Yes.
Interconnected in ways that we can barely even comprehend.
And yet we live in a world that constantly reinforces this sense of separation.
We do.
Right. I mean, we're bombarded with messages that tell us we need to be more, do
Just
more,
more.
achieve more,
Right.
as if our worth depends on it.
Exactly. And that's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
That's a recipe for anxiety, for dissatisfaction, for always feeling like we're not enough.
Right.
And it's no wonder that so many people feel lost,
Mm-hmm.
disconnected, and unfulfilled.
So how do we break free from that cycle? How
Yeah.
do we cultivate a sense of interconnectedness, of belonging
Yeah.
in a world that so often feels fragmented and isolating?
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
It is.
And I don't think there's any single answer, any magic bullet solution.
Right.
But I do think that Atisha and Osho offer some really valuable clues.
Okay, like what? Give us some hints.
Well, for starters, I think it requires a real shift in perspective.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that our true nature isn't one of lack,
Okay.
but of abundance.
Okay.
We are not separate from the source of life. We are expressions of it.
Okay, so we need to shift our perspective.
We do.
But how do we actually do that? It's not like we can just snap our fingers and suddenly see the world through rose-colored glasses.
Of course not. Of course not. It takes practice.
Right.
It takes a willingness to question our assumptions.
Yeah.
To challenge the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what's possible. And it takes cultivating a sense of presence,
Okay.
of being fully present in each moment, rather than constantly striving for some future state of happiness or fulfillment.
Yeah. So meditation, mindfulness, those are key tools in this process of shifting our perspective.
Absolutely, and so is creativity.
Okay.
Engaging in any activity that allows us to tap into that flow state, that sense of effortless creation, that can be incredibly powerful
Okay.
in breaking down those walls of separation and reconnecting us to our own inner source.
It's like we're tapping into that universal energy field.
Exactly.
That creative force that flows through all of us.
Exactly. And in those moments,
Yeah.
we catch a glimpse of our true nature, interconnected, whole,
Yeah.
and brimming with creative potential.
But it's not always easy to access that state, is it? It's not. Life throws curveballs, distractions pop up.
Right.
It's so easy to get pulled back into those old patterns of thinking and behaving.
Absolutely. And that's where Osho's teachings on rebellion become so relevant.
Okay.
He reminds us that we have a choice in every single moment.
We do.
We can either succumb to those forces of conformity, to the conditioning of our past,
Right.
or we can choose to rebel,
Okay.
to forge our own path,
Mm.
to create a life that aligns with our deepest values and aspirations.
And that rebellion doesn't have to look like some grand outward display either.
No, not at all.
It can be as simple as choosing to meditate when our mind is racing a mile a minute,
Right.
or choosing to create something beautiful when we're feeling lost and uncertain.
Exactly. It's about making those conscious choices
Yeah.
that align with our true north, that nourish our soul,
Mm-hmm.
that bring us closer to that state of interconnectedness and wholeness
Right.
that Atisha and Osho dedicated their lives to teaching.
It's about remembering that even though we're living in this fast-paced,
Yeah.
technology-driven world,
Right.
that the wisdom of these ancient teachings is still incredibly relevant.
It really is.
We may not be able to escape the pressures of modern life,
Right.
but we can learn to navigate them with more grace,
For sure.
more awareness, and a lot more compassion.
Absolutely.
And maybe, just maybe, we
Yeah.
can find ways to infuse our everyday lives with a little more poetry,
Yes.
a little more beauty, and a lot more presence.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
in doing so, we can inspire others to do the same, to
Yes.
recognize their own inner poet, to embrace their own unique path,
Yeah.
and to contribute their own unique gifts to the world.
Now that's a mission worth pursuing.
Yes.
But before we get too carried away,
Okay.
let's shift gears for a moment
Yeah.
and explore another fascinating concept that Osho highlighted.
Okay.
This idea that unreal things can trigger real things.
Ah, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
That's where he talks about mistaking a rope for a snake in the darkness. And even though the snake isn't real,
Right.
our fear is real.
Right.
The adrenaline surge, those physiological responses, all very real.
It's incredible how powerful our minds are.
They are.
That our thoughts, even if they're based on a misperception,
Yeah.
can create their own reality.
Exactly. And so much of our suffering,
Right.
our anxiety, our self-doubt stems from clinging to those misperceptions,
Right.
those limiting beliefs about ourselves and the world.
We'll be back in a moment to dive deeper into this idea of misperception
Okay.
and explore how Atisha's teachings offer a pathway to greater clarity and self-awareness.
So we're back, and I'm still thinking about that rope and snake analogy.
Yeah, me too.
It's such a powerful reminder that
Right.
our perceptions can have very real consequences.
Yeah, they can.
Even if they're not based in reality.
Yeah, it's like walking around with like this mental filter, right?
Yeah.
Coloring everything we see and experience.
Right.
And so often that filter is clouded with self-doubt, with fear, with all these limiting beliefs.
And those limiting beliefs, even if they're totally unfounded.
Can become self-fulfilling prophecies, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like that old saying,
Right.
whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
Our beliefs shape our thoughts shape our actions, and our actions create our reality.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is.
So how do we break free?
Right.
Where does Atisha's wisdom fit into all of this?
Well, one of the things that Atisha really emphasized was the importance of cultivating a really clear and discerning mind.
All right.
He saw this clarity as like this key element
Right.
in freeing ourselves from the grip of those negative thought patterns and limiting beliefs.
He wasn't advocating for some kind of blank slate, like empty mind approach to life, though, right?
Oh, no, not at all. Okay. He recognized that our minds are always going to be active,
Right.
generating thoughts and emotions.
Mhm.
But he taught that we can learn to observe those thoughts and emotions
Yeah.
with more objectivity, more awareness,
Okay.
without getting so swept away by them.
It's like becoming an observer of our own internal world.
Exactly.
Rather than being kind of ruled by it.
Right. Yes, exactly. And in that space of observation,
Yeah.
that's where we can start to challenge those limiting beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
to see them for what they really are.
Right.
Just thoughts, not truths.
Which reminds me of another point that Osho made
Yeah.
about the power of questioning.
Oh, absolutely.
He was very adamant about not just blindly accepting anything,
Yes.
even spiritual teachings, right?
Absolutely. He really encouraged
Yeah.
a spirit of inquiry,
Right.
a willingness to put everything to the test, to see what rang true in our own experience.
He wasn't exactly known for being a passive follower, was he?
Not at all.
Right.
He wanted us to engage with these teachings,
Yeah.
to wrestle with them,
Yeah.
to really integrate them into our own unique understanding of the world.
So we're questioning these limiting beliefs.
Right.
We're cultivating a more discerning mind.
Yeah.
But it's not just about tearing things down, is it?
Yeah.
There's also this element of rebuilding, of cultivating these positive qualities as well, right?
Absolutely. And that's where Atisha's emphasis on compassion comes into play.
Okay.
He saw compassion as not just like a feel-good emotion,
Right.
but as this really active force for transformation, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
So it's like compassion is the antidote to those negative patterns of thinking and behaving that we've been talking about.
Exactly. When we cultivate compassion, we're essentially rewiring our brains,
Interesting.
right? Shifting from this fear-based mindset
Right.
to a love-based mindset.
Which, when you think about the state of the world today,
Right.
feels more important than ever.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, we're facing these complex challenges.
We are.
And it's easy to feel overwhelmed
Yeah.
by fear, by anger, by despair.
Sure.
But Atisha and Osho remind us that we always have a choice.
We do.
We can choose to react to these challenges from a place of fear and separation,
Right.
or we can choose to respond from a place of love and compassion.
And those choices, those individual acts of compassion, however small they may seem,
Right.
have this power to ripple outwards,
They do.
to create a more harmonious and interconnected world.
Like that beautiful quote from the Dalai Lama.
What's that?
Be kind whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
It is always possible.
So good.
Right.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Atisha's wisdom,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways our listeners can carry with them?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to just remember that we are not broken.
Mm-hmm.
We are not separate.
Right.
We are inherently whole, interconnected, and just brimming with potential.
We just need to peel back those layers of conditioning, those limiting beliefs, and reconnect with that truth.
Exactly. And meditation, creativity, cultivating compassion.
Mhm.
These are all such powerful tools in that process.
They are.
It's an ongoing journey, though.
Right.
The practice
Yeah.
that requires patience, courage,
Yeah.
a willingness to just keep showing up for ourselves,
Yes.
even when it's hard.
even when it's hard.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that the path to a more fulfilling life isn't about becoming someone else.
No.
It's about becoming more fully ourselves,
Exactly.
more compassionate, more creative,
Yeah.
more fully alive.
Absolutely.
And in doing so, we not only transform our own lives,
Right.
but we also contribute to creating a more compassionate and
Yeah.
interconnected world.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
It really does.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, we invite you to take a deep breath. Connect with that wellspring of creativity and compassion within you, and just step boldly onto your own unique path.
You got this.
You do, you do. And remember, you don't have to walk it alone.
You don't. That's right.
There's a whole community of seekers, of poets, of compassionate souls out there,
Absolutely.
ready to support you on your journey.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Until next time, stay curious.